If you love ghost stories, folklore, and all things mysterious, you need to make a trip to Haunted in downtown Tullahoma, Tennessee. Just a short drive from Nashville, this family-owned Gothic shop is filled with the strange, unusual, and downright fascinating. This isn't a big box store full of mass-produced decorations. Haunted specializes in handmade curiosities, Gothic decor, metaphysical supplies, green witchcraft essentials, and unique pieces created by independent artists. Whether you're decorating or just looking for something you won't find anywhere else, Haunted is worth the trip. Visit them on 125 West Lincoln Street in Tullahoma, or shop online at hauntedstore.net. That's right, hauntedstore.net. Haunted, curated for the strange and unusual. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I'm your host, the American Haunt Historian, Alan Searcy. Thank you guys for joining me. So, a lot going on this summer. I'm going to be in Knoxville July 31st through August 2nd for CreepyCon. The following month, I'm going to be in Kingsport for Smoky Mountain Terror. It's always a big show. I'm looking forward to doing that in August. But lots of appearances coming up, some stuff going on in October. But hey, we're still stuck in July. It's still summer, but fall's coming. October's going to be here soon. So let's tell some ghost stories. What do you think? So, Philadelphia is one of America's oldest cities. It's a place where history seems to wait around every corner. Walk through the city and you'll find Revolutionary War landmarks, centuries-old churches, cobblestone streets, and buildings that have witnessed nearly 300 years of American history. But sometimes, history doesn't stay buried. Tonight's story begins with a church and a cemetery, and then a row of houses built where they never should have been. What followed was a series of encounters so bizarre, so unsettling, and so well documented that newspaper reporters traveled across Philadelphia to interview the people involved. They spoke of a woman in white who sang funeral songs in empty kitchens, headless apparitions standing beside beds, disembodied legs walking through houses, invisible hands shoving terrified tenants, musical instruments playing by themselves, and perhaps most disturbing of all, a grave in a cellar that refused to stay buried. This is the haunting of Lombard Street. To understand the strange events that unfolded there, we first have to go back to the early days of Philadelphia. In 1835, the Fourth Presbyterian Church relocated from a smaller building at 5th and Gaskill Streets to a magnificent new church designed by renowned architect Thomas Walter. Walter was one of the most respected architects in America and would later become famous for designing the dome of the United States Capitol building in Washington, D.C. The new church stood proudly on the southwest corner of 12th and Lombard Streets. For decades, the congregation flourished. The church became an important part of the surrounding neighborhood. Families worshiped there. Children were baptized there. Funeral services were held there. And as was common in the 19th century, many members of the congregation were buried nearby. Small church graveyards were a familiar sight throughout America. Before large municipal cemeteries became common, churches often maintained their own burial grounds for the members. For years, parishioners were laid to rest on adjoining property along Lombard Street. Then, Philadelphia began to grow. As neighborhoods expanded and land became more valuable, church graveyards increasingly became viewed as obstacles to development. And by the late 1880s, the Fourth Presbyterian congregation was preparing to relocate once again, this time to a larger building in West Philadelphia. As part of the move, church officials sold portions of their property to developers. And there was one little problem. The land contained graves. Lots of them. The burial ground had largely been forgotten. Records were incomplete. Markers had been destroyed. They disappeared. Many of the people buried there had been dead for generations. Developers moved forward anyway. In 1886, construction crews arrived and began building a row of brick houses atop the old cemetery. Workers reportedly unearthed numerous human remains during construction. Wagon loads of bones were removed. At least some graves were relocated. But many residents later believed not all the dead had been accounted for. Rumors circulated that some graves remained beneath the foundations. Others supposedly remained hidden beneath cellars and crawl spaces. And whether true or not, the stories began almost immediately after people moved in. The first major incident involved a servant named Nancy Potter. In 1888, the Harris family moved into one of the newly constructed homes. And like many middle-class families of the era, they employed a live-in servant to assist with household duties. Nancy Potter handled cooking, cleaning, and general maintenance around the home. One evening, the Harris family left to make a social visit. Expecting them to be gone for several hours, Nancy decided to enjoy a rare moment of peace and quiet. She settled into a comfortable chair in the dining room. The house was silent. Outside, the city hummed with its usual activity. Before long, she drifted off to sleep. At some point, she became aware of something unusual. Someone was singing. At first, the sound was faint, soft, almost soothing. Nancy assumed it was a neighbor. The houses were close together, and sounds often carried through the walls. She closed her eyes and tried to ignore it. But the singing continued, slow, mournful, almost like a funeral hymn. As the minutes passed, the voice seemed closer, louder. Eventually, Nancy grew curious enough to investigate. She rose from her chair and walked toward the kitchen. And what she saw, it stopped her cold. Sitting in the center of the room was a woman. The stranger wore a flowing white dress. Her skin appeared pale. And most striking of all was a large scar running across her face. Nancy stood frozen in the doorway. The woman never acknowledged her presence. Instead, she kept singing. The melody echoed through the room. The voice grew louder and louder and louder. Nancy later claimed the singing became almost unbearable. And then everything went black. She collapsed, unconscious, onto the floor. Hours later, the Harris family finally returned home. They discovered Nancy lying motionless in the kitchen and immediately summoned a physician. And once revived, Nancy recounted the incredible encounter. The Harrises listened in stunned silence because they recognized the description. Years earlier, they had known a woman who had died a horrible death. According to family lore, the woman had been beaten to death by her husband. Following the funeral, she had been buried in the old Fourth Presbyterian Cemetery, the very same cemetery that once occupied the ground beneath their home. Whether Nancy had somehow seen the spirit of that woman or merely experienced a vivid hallucination, it remains unknown. But the incident deeply unsettled the Harris family. Before long, they moved away. And interestingly, one new occupant moved into the house. And reports of the lady in white, they stopped. At least in that particular residence. A few doors down, however, another house was experiencing problems of their own. A boarding house operated by a man named Henry Jones had developed a reputation among neighbors. People whispered about strange sounds, odd sightings, unexplained events. And then, in January of 1889, a young woman named Beatrice Cassell moved in with her sister Belle. Almost immediately, she sensed something wasn't right. One afternoon, Beatrice was carrying a bucket of coal from the cellar. As she climbed the stairs, she glanced toward the kitchen. There she saw what appeared to be Mr. Jones walking toward her. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then she realized something horrifying. The figure consisted only of legs, a pair of trousers, polished boots, shiny buckles, and nothing else. No torso, no arms, no head, just legs, walking. The phantom crossed the room as if everything were perfectly normal. Beatrice later recalled hearing footsteps accompanying the apparition. The sound was unmistakable. The legs simply walked past her and just disappeared. Terrified, she briefly wondered whether Mr. Jones had suffered some terrible accident. But moments later, she realized the impossible truth. Whatever she had seen, it wasn't alive. And several days later, the mystery deepened. Beatrice and another boarder named Mosella Davis sat in the dining room discussing normal everyday matters when a group of 5 men entered the house. The strangers marched directly through the room, but none spoke. None acknowledged the women. They proceeded downstairs into the cellar. The women waited, then followed. When they reached the cellar, the men were gone, vanished. The cellar windows were secure. The door stood open. There was nowhere for anyone to escape. Yet the 5 men had simply ceased to exist. Most people would have packed their belongings and left. Not Beatrice. Instead, she began asking questions. Curious about the property's history, she spoke with longtime neighbors. And what they told her changed everything. The entire row of houses had been built atop the old Fourth Presbyterian graveyard. Neighbors recalled construction crews uncovering bodies. Some insisted graves remained beneath certain homes. Others claimed entire coffins had just been left behind. Nearly every house in the block had a reputation for ghostly activity. Armed with this new information, Beatrice made a decision that would probably horrify modern homeowners. She went searching for graves. Along with Miss Davis, she descended into the cellar carrying a shovel. And there they found something extraordinary. In the dirt floor was the unmistakable outline of a grave. The center section had sunk in slightly. A narrow crack traced the perimeter. The shape was perfectly defined. The women filled it in. They leveled the soil. They smoothed the surface. And they congratulated themselves for finally solving the problem. The next day they returned. The grave had reappeared. Not partially, not approximately, exactly. The depression in the ground, it was back. The crack had returned. It looked precisely as it had before. Again they filled it in. Again they smoothed the dirt. Again it returned. The process repeated over and over. Each time the grave somehow restored itself, as though something buried beneath refused to remain covered. Beatrice later described a growing feeling of dread whenever she approached the cellar. An overwhelming sense of fear, a sense that something unseen was watching. Something that did not appreciate being disturbed. And the activity wasn't confined just to the basement. According to Beatrice, the house itself, it seemed alive. The parlor became a focal point for strange events. Musical instruments occasionally played on their own. Doors rattled violently without explanation. Pets refused to enter the room, even when called by their owners. One evening, a door repeatedly slammed against a wall. Determined to stop the noise, Beatrice wedged a chair against it. Moments later, the chair began shaking. Not rocking gently, shaking, as though invisible hands were grabbing it. The chair continued moving until it collapsed and fell to the floor. Another incident frightened multiple witnesses. While Beatrice sat in the dining room with 3 other women, an unseen force swept through the room. The women later claimed they felt something physically push them. The sensation moved from person to person like a gust of wind with hands. Panic erupted. The ladies were so terrified they called to neighbors across the street for help, escaping through a window. Whatever occupied the house seemed capable of more than merely appearing. It could touch people, move objects, and perhaps even harm them. Soon afterward, Beatrice became ill. Confined to bed one afternoon, she expected rest. Instead, she received another visitor. A woman appeared beside the bed. The skin had a yellowish, almost orange tint. She wore a pink dress. In her hand, she held a very large, open book. For several moments, the book obscured her face. Then she lowered it. What Beatrice saw nearly sent her into hysterics. The woman had no head. There was only empty space above the neck. The headless figure remained standing silently before eventually disappearing. For Beatrice, it was among the most horrifying experiences of her life. Yet according to stories circulating among previous tenants, an even darker encounter had occurred years earlier. Residents spoke of a young girl who had seen what they described as a human monster. The creature allegedly appeared in her bedroom during the night. Witnesses described it as part human and part beast. It possessed a single glowing green eye, long twisted horns, and a grotesque appearance unlike anything the child had ever seen. Following the encounter, the girl reportedly collapsed into convulsions. She never recovered. Soon afterwards, she died. And whether the story was true or just neighborhood folklore, no one really knows, but by the time Beatrice heard it, she was already convinced the house was haunted. 3 months was enough. In April, she married and moved away from Lombard Street forever. She never came back. Over the time, the houses themselves disappeared. Urban renewal projects transformed the neighborhood. Buildings were demolished. New construction arrived. Eventually, the entire haunted row vanished. Today, if you visit the location where the Fourth Presbyterian burial ground once stood, you won't find the houses. You won't find the boarding house. You won't find the cellar grave. Instead, you'll find something far less dramatic. A parking lot. Cars now occupy ground once filled with graves. Drivers come and go without realizing what may lie beneath the pavement. But perhaps that's fitting. After all, the story isn't really about ghosts, it's about memory. It's about what happens when the dead are forgotten, when graves are moved, when cemeteries disappear, when history's buried beneath progress. Sometimes the dead stay quiet, and sometimes they remind us that they're still there. Maybe that's why the lady in white sang in Nancy Potter's kitchen. Maybe that's why phantom footsteps echo through Henry Jones's boarding house. Maybe that's why a grave in a cellar refused to stay filled. The people beneath Lombard Street had been forgotten. Maybe they just wanted to be remembered. So if you enjoyed this episode and want to learn more about the haunted history of Philadelphia, check out Southern Ghost Stories Philadelphia. I know, Southern Ghost Stories Philadelphia, it's kind of confusing, I get it. When I first wrote my first few books, I wrote I think 4 or 5 or 6 books about Tennessee, and I had the Southern Ghost Stories title. I did one in Louisville, then I went to Philadelphia. Southern Ghost Stories fits for Louisville. But I had the Southern Ghost Stories thing going, so why not just put Philadelphia? If you're in Maine, Philadelphia is south, but most people know it as the Northeast. So anyway, after that, I kind of learned my lesson. I started, like my Chicago book, I started using the title Fear and Folklore, Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales, Chicago, or Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales, Cincinnati. I started using a different title for the northern books. But anyway, so Southern Ghost Stories Philadelphia, it's a fun book. It's got a bunch of good reviews, and there's a lot of history. Everything is haunted in Philadelphia. The book is available on Kindle, and if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. You really can't beat that. And speaking of books, also a lot of history. Make sure you check over to Amazon and pick up my latest book, Pistols at Red River, the Andrew Jackson Doolin story. Andrew Jackson was married to a married woman. Rachel was married to a guy in Harrodsburg, and when they got together, and Andrew Jackson was the butt of every joke and every saloon in Nashville. He was a hot-headed guy, as you know, and he got tired of it, called a guy out. They went to the state line, and they hashed it out like men, with pistols, as one should when someone defamed your wife. Anyway, Pistols at Red River, go check it out. It's done really well, really excited about it. Done a lot of appearances and media stuff for it, so check that one out. And also, make sure you leave a review for the show, Southern Ghost Stories. Subscribe to the podcast. It really helps more people find the show and helps us grow in the algorithms for Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that good stuff. Quite another question for you. Have you guys been to Monster City Madhouse yet? MonsterCityMadhouse.com. The new shirt, a whole lot of fun. And I may or may not have had a hand in its creation. It's up for debate. The greatest cryptid tag team of all time has arrived. Straight from the deepest forest of cryptid mania comes the monster powers, featuring the Yeti and the Bigfoot in an over-the-top tribute to classic 1980s wrestling, monster magazines, and larger-than-life personalities. Packed with colorful retro artwork, outrageous promos, championship gold, and enough cryptid power to shake the woods. This exclusive Monster City Madhouse design is perfect for wrestling fans, cryptid hunters, horror lovers, and anyone who appreciates old-school cartoon mayhem. Whether you're tracking Bigfoot, searching for the Yeti, or just ready to watch the mega monsters run wild, brother, this shirt was made to stand out. You can use promo code SAVE10 to get 10% off your order. That's right, get 10% off your order at MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Use the promo code SAVE10. So, funny story about that shirt. My buddy Ben owns Monster City Madhouse, and they do a lot of cool retro Halloween shirts. And I kept throwing ideas like Hulk Hogan and Macho Man, the Mega Powers, and play on that shirt or play on that old school Hulk Hogan Macho Man thing. And then a few months later, the Mega Monsters come out running wild, brother. So I've been joking and telling him he owes me $0.25 for every shirt he sells. Anyway, go to monstercitymadhouse.com. Check it out. It's a fun shirt. All this stuff's good. I love Ben. Great guy. Make sure you're following Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook and Instagram. And thank you guys for listening to Southern Ghost Stories. I'm Alan Searcy, the American Haunted Historian, and I will see you guys again on Monday for another episode from the Vault. So be sure you check us out. Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available. If you love ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, and everything that goes bump in the night, then mark your calendars for the West Kentucky Paranormal Expo, happening September 26 in Mayfield, Kentucky at the Mayfield Graves County Fairgrounds. This incredible one-day event brings together some of the biggest names in the paranormal community, including Aaron G. Thompson from Netflix's 28 Days Haunted, Jimmy and Jeffrey from Outlaw Paranormal, The Wyndham Bros, Josh Morris, Michael Huntington, Rachel Ravensville, and many, many more special guests and speakers. Your admission is just $15, and that gets you an all-day come-and-go wristband so you can explore at your own pace. Browse more than 35 vendors, enjoy delicious food trucks, attend speaker presentations and panels, meet investigators, hear incredible stories, and dive into the worlds of hauntings, cryptids, UFOs, and the unexplained. Whether you're a seasoned ghost hunter or just curious about the mysteries that surround us, there's something for everyone at the West Kentucky Paranormal Expo. Tickets are on sale now. For more information, visit West Kentucky Paranormal Expo on Facebook and get ready for one of the most exciting paranormal events of the year. We'll see you in Mayfield on September 26th.